may get emotional today. So when I told you I want today to be interactive, okay, I titled this message, which I don't like doing, and nobody asked me to do it for the bulletin, but I entitled this message, Shake It Off. And so I want all of you to stand up. I want you to stand up. I want you to look at the person beside you, and I want you to say, shake it off. And then the person you rejected, I want you to look at the person on the other side that you shunned and say to them, shake it off. All right. All right, you can sit down. Yeah, they judged him, right? You immediately turned to the person you like and rejected the other person. Kenny got what I was saying, all right? So I'm going to be in the story, and I've actually talked about this before, but I'm going to be in the story of Jacob and Esau. All right? And if you all know this story, Jacob and Esau are in the womb. They're fighting in the womb. There's going to be two nations birthed from you. Esau's born first. Jacob comes out clutching his ankle. And then it says that there comes a time when Esau goes out hunting, and he's obviously, I made this joke last time, he was like Brandon, but Brandon's not here this time. So we'll say like Tanner, he's not a very good hunter. So he comes home, and he's really hungry, and he trades his birthright to Jacob for some bread and lentil stew or soup, or like bean stew or soup or something. I don't know. That's just a weird thing. So then we jump forward, and I'm going to jump into the part here where Isaac is old. Their dad is Isaac, and he's getting old. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to read some of the story, and then we'll get into the message, okay? So it says, when Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and bow, go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me, prepare me the kind of tasty food I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Now I need to stop and tell you one thing, okay? Esau is Dad's favorite. Esau's the hunter. He likes to play football. He likes to play hockey. He loves to play wiffle ball, right? And then there's Jacob. Jacob likes to stay in the tent. Jacob likes to be with his mom. He likes to be where it's cool in the shade. He likes to cook. He likes to whatever. Now, what I want to say is everybody's different. Parents, don't try to force your kids to do things that they don't really want to do. Take who they are and mold that thing. All right? That's a side note. That's just my thinking. Okay, so I'm not going to read all this word for word because there's a lot, and I have a lot in my brain that I need to get out. Okay, so Esau goes out hunting. Their mother hears this. Jacob being her favorite, she grabs Jacob. She says, "Jacob, go and kill a couple young goats. Bring them to me. I'm going to make this stew. We're going to trick your dad. He's going to give you the blessing." Jacob says, "No, I don't want to do this." She says, "Trust me." He says, "Hey, Esau is really hairy." She says, "That's okay. I've got that taken care of. Just do what I'm telling you to do." He kills these goats. They make this food. They take the goat skins and put them on him, okay? This is a weird thing because I can't imagine what Esau actually looked like. Because he says, if my dad touches my skin, he's going to know. So they put goat skins on. All right, how hairy must Esau have been? So they do this, and he goes in, and he says, he went to him and said, "My father." And he says, "Yes, my son, who is it?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord gave me success," he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." Jacob went close to his father, who touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he proceeded to bless him. Are you ready? Are you really my son Esau? He asked. I am, he replied. Then he said, my son, bring me some of your game to eat so that I may give you my blessing. Jacob brought it to him, and he ate. And he brought some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, come here, my son, and kiss me. So he went to him and kissed him. Now, here's another thing I left out, is that he's wearing Esau's clothes because homeboy that stays back in the tent doesn't smell like the guy who lives out in the wild, right? There's an odor difference. So when Isaac catches the smell of the clothes, he says, yes, this is my son. So he blesses him, and this is what he blesses him with. Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. He said, my father, please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing. His father Isaac asked him, who are you? I am your son, he answered, your firstborn Esau. Isaac trembled violently and said, who is it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry to his father, bless me too, my father. But he said, your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. Esau said, isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he has taken advantage of me. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing. Then he asked, haven't you reserved any blessing for me? Isaac answered Esau, I have made him lord over you, and have made him all the relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what could I possibly do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too. And Esau wept loudly. His father Isaac answered him, your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from your neck. Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, the days of mourning of my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob. And that's where I'm going to stop. Before, when I've read this story, I really focused on Jacob. And I believe the last time I talked about this, I talked about how Jacob was a deceiver who God chose and used despite of who he was. But when God started talking to me about this, he started talking to me about the blessing that Esau received, which I had never focused on. And when I got in it and I started reading, and you read the despair in Esau's voice, it really got to me. He's crushed. But it's the blessing that and if you remember the blessing of Jacob, it's amazing. And how polar opposite the blessing that Esau gets. And I'm going to read it to you again. Your dwelling will be away from earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. You will live by the sword, but when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. Now, I need to stop for a second and talk to you about a yoke. And so, this is what I'm saying. I didn't just have this laying around the house, right? Well, when I got this picture of a yoke, I had a thing in my basement that was like a horse harness that I thought I could make work. And I started working on the message in my mind, and it just wasn't working. So, I want to show you this. This is a yoke, okay? And in biblical times, they worked with a team of oxen. And this is the yoke they used, okay? So these have pins that pull out, all right? And these things pull out, and you'd put this on the ox's neck, and then you cinch this back on there. If I can do this with one hand, because I'm not a farmer who worked with these. And so then the ox is stuck in there, right? And we hear of these when Elijah calls Elisha, or I don't know why their names are so similar. I think it's because God's saying, it doesn't matter what your name is, I'm going to use who I want to use. But this is how they're hooked up, okay? And I wanted you to see this image because this is the yoke he took on, right? And I think here, most of us are like Esau. Esau thought he was owed something. He thought he had an inheritance coming. So he had done nothing to deserve it, except for the fact that he was born first. And barely, because his brother's holding on to his heel as he comes out. But he has this belief that this is what he's owed. And so when he's deceived, he takes a yoke upon himself. And I think we do this all the time in our lives without even realizing it. We take on yokes that we should not take on. And some of us take them on we get offended by things. Maybe in your life you thought you deserved an inheritance that you didn't get. Maybe in life you go to your job and you're working your job diligently for 10 years, and then some new joker comes in and he's been there 2 years and he gets the promotion that should have been yours. And as I talked to my wife about this, I thought her and I, we didn't have trouble conceiving children. If you see, we have it. It's just easy for us. But there's people who struggle with that. And it would be easy in that situation to say, here I am, I'm serving God, and you won't give me this thing I desire. And here's these two yahoos over here. Because we weren't serving the Lord when we started having kids. We didn't want anything to do with him at the time. And yet it just happened. And it's easy for even people in the church to look at people out there who are having kids and not even taking care of them. And we're saying, and we start to take this yoke upon ourselves. And what happens is this yoke is connected to something, okay? In the story of Elisha, he's plowing, but it can have a cart behind it. And maybe the yoke you took on is maybe you were abused as a child. Maybe verbally, maybe physically. Maybe it's something that you couldn't help. It's something you couldn't stop, but it's something that happened that caused you to have your head stuck in something, and it is controlling your life. Or maybe the yoke you have is a yoke of saying, I am not worthy, I am not good enough, all right? I don't know what your yoke is, but a lot of us have it. I want you to take just a second and I want you to look at this thing, and I want you to ask God, what is my yoke? What do I have my head so stuck in? Because when we take this yoke on, that cart that we're pulling behind us, we start filling that cart up with stuff. Like maybe you were working that job and you didn't get the promotion you thought you deserved, and then you walk in the break room, and when you walk in the break room, everybody quits talking, and you think they were talking about you. You know what I mean? And it's not even real, but it is in your mind now because you have this yoke on you. And I want you to notice something about the yoke. There's 2 slots. And here's what's going to happen. When you get your head in that yoke and that cart starts getting heavy, the enemy's going to come. He's going to stick his head in the other side, and he's going to start helping you pull that cart. And some of you are saying, no, he wouldn't help me. Oh, yeah, he would. Because he wants your head stuck in that yoke, and he wants you pulling that cart. As long as he can keep you pulling that and keep you distracted by that, he can keep you doing what God's called you to do and who God has called you to be. Not only that, when he sticks his head in there and your head's right there, he's right here and you're right there, and he can whisper stuff in your ear. He can say, you see why your boss is looking at you different? Because he doesn't like you. He doesn't think you're doing a good job. Do you know why your spouse is being mean to you? It's because you're not worthy. Do you know why you were abused as a child? Because now all your junk, you've stuck it back here in this cart. All he's got to do is look back there, and he can read your mail. He can say, that junk you're carrying around, you deserve it. Your head should be in here. And then if he sees you trying to go a way that he doesn't want you to go, you're locked together. Your free will's gone. Because you're so consumed by what has happened to you in your life. And I'm telling you, look around our country right now, and everybody's blaming somebody for holding them down or holding them back. And the truth of the matter is, no matter how good a cart is, eventually if you stuck enough junk in it, it becomes an anchor that you can't move anymore. And we're so busy, if we keep pulling it forward and we don't stop and face what got us there, we can't get rid of it. And then I want to jump forward in this story because it talks about Jacob has received his father's blessing, right? Esau doesn't get it. And so mom hears that Esau says he's going to kill Jacob. So she says, Jacob, you got to go. Go live with your uncle. Marry somebody from there. You got to go. So she goes and tells dad he needs to go. So his dad brings him in, blesses him again, and sends him away. Jacob leaves. He goes and he stops to rest, and he has this vision as he's asleep of a stairway to heaven. And God tells him there, I'm going to bless the whole earth through your offspring. I'm going to use you to bless the entire earth. So he creates an altar and he names this place Bethel. Then he moves on. He goes and he gets to the place he's going and he meets his dream woman. A lot of you probably know this story. He falls in love and he asks her dad, what have I got to do? He works for 7 years for free to get this girl's hand in marriage. Now some of you guys think, yeah, no problem. I wouldn't mind doing that. I love my wife that much. So he worked for 7 years for free, and then on the wedding night, dad slips in the other sister. I don't know how marriages worked, right? Things must have been different than the way I got married. I think I would have noticed a different woman there. But he slips in this other girl who's, I don't know, there's just something about her that's not quite as appealing. So he has to marry her first, but then he gets to marry his dream girl, but he has to work for another 7 years for free. But he continues to work for his father-in-law who sort of connives and changes his wages and does these things and kind of takes advantage of him. But it says Jacob is blessed. He has children. His herds expand. He is blessed. Eventually, God says, hey, you got to get out of here because your father-in-law is like turning against you. And so I'm not going to go into all the details of Jacob and his father-in-law because they're really shady dudes. I mean, the way they do business to each other. But Jacob becomes very wealthy, and him and his wives, and their children leave, and they're going to go back home to where Esau is. And as they're traveling back, if you read this story, you can just sense the stress that's on Jacob going back to encounter Esau, who he thinks wants to kill him, right? His brother has been saying he's going to kill him. So he's headed back. Now, years have gone by. But as he gets back, he begins saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy my brother off, so I'm going to give him 200 of these, and I'm going to give him 200, like his livestock. I'm going to give him like 200 rams or sheep, and I don't remember the livestock, but he gives him like 200 of these and 200 of these and a bunch of camels, and he's got servants going out with him, and he says, I want you to go in front, and when my brother comes, I want you to say, these are from your brother, your servant. That's what he keeps calling himself. These are from your servant, Jacob, because you could just feel the stress, like, what can you blame me? Somebody wants to kill you. You don't really want to go back and hang with them. And so as they're going back, he's preparing this way, and he stops, and he sends everybody across this little river, and he goes back, and he lays down to sleep, and he gets in this wrestling match with a man, which again is just sort of a weird story, but he wrestles with this man, and they wrestle all night long. Have y'all ever wrestled? It's a vigorous thing. My kids wrestled for a while, and they got good at wrestling, and I'd try to wrestle them. It would wear me out. Of course, I am old. But it says he wrestles with him. He wrestles with this guy all night long. And as morning comes, the guy touches his hip and wrenches the socket and messes him up. And the man says, "Let go of me." And Jacob says, "Not until you bless me." So the man says, "What is your name?" And he says, "Jacob." And he says, "Not anymore. You will now be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans, and you have overcome." And Jacob says, "Tell me your name." And he says, "Why do you need to know my name?" And he says, he wrestled with God. Now here's the interesting part of the story to me. Jacob's wrestling with this guy, which seems odd. But when the guy says, "Let go of me," Jacob says, "Not until you bless me." Wait a second. You got the birthright. Your dad blessed you twice before you left. Then on the way, you have this vision from God in which he says he's going to use you and your offspring to bless the whole world. Why are you refusing to quit fighting this dude until he blesses you? Your livestock is numerous. You have servants. You have wives. You have a bunch of kids. And yet you are still begging for a blessing. You see, sometimes in our lives, we think, because we live in social media, that everybody's lives are so much better than ours. We're missing our own blessings. And part of the reason Jacob is missing his own blessings is because he knows almost all of them he got through manipulation. So he's got a yoke on himself of shame and regret. He's carrying a burden. And see, we think sometimes that somebody's holding us back because they're succeeding. Like that person that got the promotion that you deserved. And yet that person is probably looking at you wishing to have the blessings that you have. Jacob is wealthy, but he's missing it. Not only that, but the other wife that he's not real fond of, she's blessing him with kids, and none of them are making him happy. He's missing the blessings that God has given him because his head is in a yoke that shouldn't be there. And then this thing happens where he has sent his servants out to tell Esau, "Your servant Jacob is coming." And they come back and they say, "Here comes your brother Esau with 400 men. And this is when you see Jacob go, "Oh snap. Hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right." And so he begins arranging things to his best benefit, right? He starts saying, "Okay, I'm going to put my servant and her kids here, and then I'm going to put the ugly sister here with her kids, and then I'm going to put my favorite one back here with these kids because they're my favorite." So I guess he's thinking like Esau is going to come in a bloodlust, and he's going to kill me, and he's going to kill my servant and her kids, and maybe he'll get the ugly sister and her kids, but maybe then he'll feel like he's avenged himself and these will be spared. I guess that's what's going on in his mind. I really can't wrap my mind around it, but everything he does is a manipulation. So when Esau arrives on the scene with 400 guys riding down on you, that cannot be a good feeling, right? And if you read the story, Jacob has sent most of his servants on. And so as Esau is approaching, Jacob begins bowing down to him. It says he bows down to him 7 times, and he keeps saying, "I'm your servant, I'm your servant." Everything he done has been a manipulation to buy his brother's favor. Have you read this story? Do you know what Esau does? While Jacob's overwhelmed with dread, it says that Esau runs to him and throws his arms around his neck and kisses him. Don't you know Jacob's mind is blown? And then he says, "Who are these with you?" And so he's introducing, now he's feeling pretty good about himself. Like now he's wishing the cute girl would have been out front so he could introduce the hot one first, right? Because now he's wanting to brag about things. And after the family introductions, he says, what is the meaning of all these herds that I've met on the way? And he says, oh, it's just a humble gift from your lowly servant, And Esau's like, I don't need that stuff. I got plenty of stuff of my own. And he says, no, please take him. And Esau ends up taking him. Wait a second. What do you mean Esau's got plenty of his own? He didn't get the blessing. He didn't get the birthright. He didn't get the blessing. God didn't. Maybe he did. But we don't hear God tell him, I'm going to bless the whole world through you. We don't see a wrestling match with him and God. But Esau says, I don't need your stuff. I got stuff of my own. It's like, what's the deal here? Why is Jacob the one who's feeling all bad? He got every blessing. He got every promotion. He got everything. And yet he's the one filled with dread and shame and all this stuff. And Esau comes rolling up and he's so happy to see his brother that he runs to him and he hugs him and he kisses him and he meets the family. What's the deal? And I realized something. God said it's because Esau threw Jacob's yoke off. He said that stuff, that's Jacob's stuff. Jacob deceived. Jacob lied. Jacob did all that stuff. But I'm my own man. I'm my own person. I can prosper on my own. And the funny thing is here, Jacob tells Esau, Esau says, come with me. And he says, no, you go on ahead. I need to stay with the young animals and move them along. And they settle. And then they have to, if you jump forward in the story a little bit, it says that Jacob and Esau, they have to separate from one another because their wealth is so great and their livestock are so many, they can't live in close proximity because the resources are not available. Which means Esau must have been a wealthy dude. How did he get wealthy when he didn't get the blessing? Do we think for a second that God doesn't want to bless everybody? And I said, God, why is it that he was able to throw off the yoke? And he said, look back at the story. Because remember, Isaac is old at the start. He can't see. He can't even tell his son with goat skins on him from his other son. And when Jacob leaves, he's gone for a bunch of years, 20-some years. He comes back. And it talks about they separate. Okay, it talks about the deaths of Rachel and Isaac. And it says that Esau and Jacob bury Isaac together. He's lived to be like 100 and, I don't even remember, like old. 130-some years old or something. He's like pretty old. 180 years old when he dies. And Esau and Jacob buried him. God said, that's why Esau was able to shake this yoke off of his neck. Because he had a loving father that was there to help him process stuff. That was there to help him move past the stuff that was meant to hold him back. That was meant to slow him down. See, a lot of us have been blessed so much by God, but we're distracted because we look at what we think is perfection in the other person's life. You know, like Instagram and Facebook and that stuff, most of the stuff you see on there is not as good as you think that it is. That perfect vacation that everybody went on, they were yelling at their kids in the car on the way there. You're not the only one. They may have had a flat tire on the way. Guess what? They're not going to Instagram that. But we're so focused on people's highlight reels, and we're so focused on our own rejection reels, because let's face it, that's the easier thing to look at. right? And I'm going to tell you something, what we do, we take offense on ourselves like nothing I've ever seen. We're offended every time someone breathes too close to us, right? This thing of people getting irritated at people chewing, and they say it's like this real disease. I say, come on now, get over it. You know you're making noise chewing too. Maybe that's a message for another day, right? But you all see what I'm saying about this yoke, is that your neck is not meant to be in here. And it inadvertently, a lot of times, brings us in alignment with someone we should be directly opposed to. And he's going to do every single thing he can to keep your head in the other side. And what he doesn't want you to do, he doesn't want you to slow down and look long enough to figure out the why of why the yoke is around your neck. Because when I ask you to focus on this thing, I don't know where you guys are at. But I can tell you that a lot of you thought in your mind, I'm hoping all of you pictured something. But I'm betting a lot of you pictured the yoke as, let's use anger. You thought, I have a yoke of anger. When in reality, anger is the result of the thing that put the yoke on your neck. Right? Some of you might have said, well, I'm not good at relationships. The reason you're not good at relationships is a result of what put you right here. Right? People abuse you, so you say, I'm not going to have relationships with people. I'm going to hold them out here. I'm not going to talk to them. You're angry because people have done things to you in the past, so anger continues. And I want to tell you something else. A lot of times we get hurt, and the hurt is what puts us in there. And a lot of times because the hurt is what puts us in there, we try to put hurt on other people in order to make ourselves feel better. And can I tell you, when we do that, all we're doing is putting someone else's head in one of these, and we have to stop doing that. I entitled this message, Shake It Off, because I believe God wants to do something in your life. And when I say yours, internalize that. I'm not just talking to this church as a body. I'm talking to you as an individual. If you think that you are here today by accident, and I am here today by accident, you are gravely mistaken. I made a decision several years ago to tell God, you give me the message and you give me the audience, and I will say whatever you want me to say, whenever you want me to say it, to whoever you want me to say it to. I came here last night and I literally walked around and prayed over these seats, and I said, God, you put the person you want in this seat and you give me the message. And let me tell you something. Have y'all read about the day of Pentecost when Peter stands up and preaches a message, and every single person there, even though they speak different languages, hears him and understands him? I believe that is happening right now. I believe that right now I'm telling one story and one message, and it's hitting each person in a different spot in their life, and it means something different to them where they are in their walk. And if you don't believe it, you're not receiving it. Because this isn't a message for a person who walked in on the first Sunday, and it isn't just a message for somebody who's been coming to church for 50 years. This is a message for every single one of you. We have to shake this yoke off of our neck. Because as long as we're pinned in there, we cannot fulfill what God has for us. The book of Isaiah, there's a prophecy there that says, in that day, the people will break the yoke from their neck because of their fat. Okay? It's been translated as anointing, but they said really it's more like because of their fat, which, okay, let's not do that way. But what it's saying is these people eventually are going to get so big and so strong that the yoke is not going to be able to hold them anymore. And so what today is a celebration that God's saying today in your life, you are ready to break that thing off. Not because of anything you have done, but because of what Jesus Christ has done for you in your life. He came and he broke it off. He said, you take my yoke on you. Because Jacob is carrying around shame and regret, and he's in the midst of that yoke. Jesus says, you take my yoke on his neck, on your neck. You know why he said that? Because Jesus had nothing to be ashamed of. He had nothing to be regretful about. He had no burden to bear. And so he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the cross and I'm going to take your yoke on me and I'm going to give you mine. He said, I want you to stop focusing on that stuff that doesn't matter. The worldly goods do not matter. He says, I want you to focus on the fact that while you were not worthy, I deemed you worthy. You are holy, righteous, and redeemed. Walk in it. This is the yoke we should carry every single day. This is why when we walk in this building, we should be full of joy and love and passion for one another. Because a God who didn't know us a doggone thing gave us everything. Everything. And so I'm going to give you all a challenge. And I want the worship team, I want you all to wait a minute. I'm hoping they're recording this today. And I want everything I say to get on there because I want everybody that sees this and hears it to hear every word that I say. Because God says today He wants to break some yokes from some necks. And so I drove an hour and a half and went and bought this thing. And I told my wife when I bought it, I might resell it because what am I going to do with it? And when I was up here praying last night, God said, I want you to go around and I want you to find some Sharpies. And so I found some Sharpies and I put them up here in this bucket. And I'm getting ready to read a note. And when I get done reading this letter, their worship team's going to come up and start worshiping, but I don't want them to start because I don't know how the video, when they stop, but a lot of times they stop when the music starts, and I want everybody to be able to hear the whole part of this letter. And then when I'm done and the worship starts, I'm going to challenge you guys to say that today is the day I'm going to break this yoke from my neck. Now, I'm not foolish enough to think that it's going to go bam, and it's going to be gone. But today is the day you're going to decide, I'm going to begin strengthening myself so that my fat will break this yoke from my neck. And so these Sharpies are up here because I want you to come up here and I want you to write something on this yoke. I want this to be a memory stone moment in your life, and sometimes I think we have to step out. Look, I think this is what repenting to one another looks like, is being willing to stand up in front of a group of people and say, you know what, this guy is right, I am struggling with this. We don't necessarily have to tell everybody in the room what it is, but we have to be willing to stand up and say, I'm not perfect, I am struggling with this. I want to challenge you guys to come up here and write something on this yoke. And maybe you put your initials and the date. Maybe you put what your yoke is. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know what I'll do with it. I'm probably going to leave it here for a couple of weeks. Eventually, I think I'll probably take it home and put it, I've got like a roll-top desk where I prepare my messages. Probably going to take it home and lay it up there with all of my other stuff I have up there. My memory stones. As the day that the yoke began to be broke in people's life. The word yoke sounds funny when you just keep saying it over and over, right? I keep wanting to say egg yolk, but the yoke has to be broke. For us to live up to our purpose and to live up to what God has for us, it has to be broke. And so, if somebody's watching on YouTube and you want something wrote on the yoke, just comment. I'll go look at, can you do comments on YouTube? Just comment what your thing you want wrote on, and I'll write it on there. Because part of what's going to happen is I'm going to pray over that thing. And when I'm praying over that thing, I'm going to be praying over the people that wrote their junk on it. Because what I want to see the captives set free. I want the church to be able to run at their full capacity without that cart full of junk holding them back, being an anchor in their lives. So I'm going to read this letter to you. And I'll just tell you right up front, this is a letter from God to you. And every line on this is a verse out of the Bible, okay? So it's this, I haven't just made this up. Somebody actually gave this to my wife and I. But I want to read it, and as I read it, I want you to really focus and realize that this is speaking to you. And this is not me speaking to you. This is the God of all creation speaking to you where you're at today through His holy word. And if you want to copy this, I'll make copies when I'm done, and I'll give them to you so you can go and look and make sure the verses are there. Okay? My child, you may not know me, but I know everything about you. I know when you sit down. I know when you rise up. I am familiar with your ways. Even the very even the very hairs on your head are numbered. For you were made in my image. In me you live and move and have your being. For you are my offspring. I knew you even before you were conceived. I chose you when I planned creation. Come on now. You were not a mistake, for all your days are written in my book. I determined the exact time of your birth and where you would live. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. I knit you together in your mother's womb and brought you forth on the day you were born. I have been misrepresented by those who don't know me. I am not distant and angry, but am the complete expression of love. And it is my desire to lavish my love on you, simply because you are my child and I am your father. I offer you more than your earthly father ever could, for I am the perfect father. Every good gift that you receive comes from my hand, for I am your provider and I meet all your needs. My plan for your future has always been filled with hope, because I love you with an everlasting love. My thoughts toward you are countless as the sand on the seashore, and I rejoice over you with singing. I will never stop doing good to you, for you are my treasured possession. I desire to establish you with all my heart and all my soul. And I want to show you great and marvelous things. If you seek me with all your heart, you will find me. Delight in me, and I will give you the desires of your heart. For it is I who gave you those desires. I am able to do more for you than you could possibly imagine. For I am your greatest encourager. I am also the Father who comforts you in all your troubles. When you are brokenhearted, I am close to you. As a shepherd carries a lamb, I have carried you close to my heart. One day I will wipe away every tear from your eyes, and I will take away all the pain you have suffered on this earth. I am your Father, and I love you even as I love my Son, Jesus. For in Jesus, my love for you is revealed. He is the exact representation of my being. He came to demonstrate that I am for you, not against you, and to tell you that I am not counting your sins. Jesus died so that you and I could be reconciled. His death was the ultimate expression of my love for you. I gave up everything I loved that I might gain your love. If you receive the gift of my Son Jesus, you receive me, and nothing will ever separate you from my love again. Come home, and I'll throw the biggest party heaven has ever seen. I have always been Father and will always be Father. My question is, will you be my child? I am waiting for you. Love your dad, Almighty God. Team, if you guys come on up. Y'all understand that those words are what God is speaking over your life. You've been chosen and you've been appointed for a purpose. The very place that you're living is not by accident. And those things that put you in the yoke, here's the greatest thing about all of this is the thing that puts you in the yoke, the thing that you're going to break free of, you're going to be able to speak that thing into somebody else's life and help break free of that yoke faster than you did. Because when we're real and we're honest with one another, it helps break that thing. When we realize that everybody's head has been in there and maybe still is in there, it gives the other person strength and courage to grow and break that yoke from their own neck. I want to encourage you today that whatever put you in there, God is big enough to get you out. So I'm going to let them play, and if you guys want to come up here and write something, look, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you don't. God asked me to give a message, and I'm going to give it. But I believe whether you do it or don't do it, God is speaking to your heart today. And I believe that there's some of you right now whose faith is growing and you're straining against that yoke. And I believe that today is the day when the breaking begins. I'm going to let them sing. You guys do what you'll do, and then I'll come back up here and pray to dismiss you.